This video is going to continue the discussion of attempts to change attitudes using persuasion, and I'm going to talk about the elaboration likelihood model. And in this model, there are essentially two routes or paths to persuasion. And this is related to something that I brought up previously when we were talking about social cognition. And I brought up the idea that we often acknowledge that there are kind of two general types of thinking. You have your shallower, more intuition-based thinking, and your deeper, logical, rational-based thinking. With our paths to persuasion, we have sort of a similar dichotomy that seems reasonable. And so with the elaboration likelihood model, the idea is that depending on what you're trying to persuade people to do, you might use different means, different techniques of persuasion, depending on the motivation of the person. So it's a theory of persuasion that suggests that the most effective persuasive technique depends on the motivation of the listener. All right, so you have to consider your audience when you are shaping your message, shaping your advertisement, your political speech, your sales pitch, whatever it might be. And so your two routes or routes. First, we're going to talk about the central route to persuasion. The central route to persuasion focuses on strong, well-presented arguments that are personally relevant and that appeal to reason. So this goes along with your deeper, more logic or rational type of thinking. Previously, I mentioned that type of thinking, it's harder, it takes more effort. All right, there are going to be times in life when you're going to be more motivated to engage in that type of thinking. For things like high stakes decisions, for example, those important decisions, those are when you are willing to put in that effort to to take the time and make the efforts to consider all of the evidence. That's when you might be motivated more by the central route to persuasion. Now, the peripheral route. It's more indirect, all right? And this is their technique that involves evaluating an argument based on tangential cues, and I'll discuss that word in a bit, but tangential cues rather than on the argument's merits, all right? What does it mean to be on a tangent? You might have learned this like in geometry. A tangent is like off to the side. And no, I'm not a mathematician, so that may not be the best way to describe it. But when something is tangential, it's not that it's completely irrelevant, but it's not the core feature of an argument or a situation. Something that's tangential is sort of less essential to an argument, to decision making, for example. And so with the peripheral route, you are trying to convince people based on factors, information, elements that are not central, that are not essential to whatever the situation may be. So let's give you some examples here. All right, so let's say you're trying to make a purchase. All right, let's say you're looking for a new shirt. All right, you're looking for a new shirt and you're shopping around. A new shirt for most people is not going to be like a high stakes decision. And so if somebody's like, hey, don't you like that shirt? It's a really nice color. You may be swayed by this probably tangential, less essential information. Whereas if it's something like a new car is a high stakes decision. Most people are not going to go and buy a car on a whim unless they're like really rich and they got lots of money. But most regular people, that's a big decision, buying a car. And so if you're just like, hey, look at this car, it's a great color, you're gonna be like, yeah, that's tangential, that's not essential. I'm buying a car. I am here to use my deeper level thinking. I want to make a good decision. You're gonna have to go the central route for something like buying a car. You're gonna have to focus on what are the essential features of this car that make me want to buy it. Whereas for your lower stakes stuff, it's just like, okay, you can tell me shallow stuff. All right, so let's use a political ad sort of situation or political speech sort of situation. Depending on what you're voting for or depending on how much you care about politics, this might be high stakes or low stakes. If you are somebody who cares very deeply about that election, you may be looking for more, central sort of information, like, okay, so what's this person's voting record? What's their experience? Whereas if you don't care as much, you are not invested in this particular election, this particular decision, you might be swayed by more peripheral means, peripheral information, like, hey, does this person seem cool? Do they look okay? Are they a member of the party that I approve of? And you might not go much deeper than that because you are less motivated. It's less high stakes for you. So with the elaboration likelihood model, the idea is your effective route to persuasion is going to depend on the motivation of the person. Basically, how much information are they looking for? How much of that deeper thinking are they willing to get into? And if they want to make a quick decision, they want to make a quick, easy decision, you can go the peripheral route and you can focus on non-essential information. You can focus on tangential factors, and then they can make their decision quickly. They want to make an informed decision for like a high stakes sort of situation, you're going to have to go into more detail, give lots of evidence that follows the central route to persuasion.